Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Greet the Week. I'm Jan Moray, and I'm here with my co-host, Mona Duncan. And today, our topic is change is an inside job. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could get other people to do the changing for us? But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, does it, Mona?
No, it sure doesn't. And, back when, and I noticed in the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade, they had Smokey the Bear was one of the big balloons that they had, and the wind gust was up, so they had to really hold him down to keep him from flying away. But, he has been the icon for years that only you can prevent forest fires. And the thing of it is that whenever we want to change is an inside job. And only you can get into your brain, what you are thinking and how you are seeing things. And you're the only one that has access to those thoughts. And it is thoughts that produces actions, and actions that then brings the thoughts and the actions working together is what gives us our feelings. And so as we can begin to work on the front wheels where we have direct control over of what we're thinking and what we're doing, then our emotions follow along, and we find that we can change rather easily. So I thought we'd talk about the fact that we are born once, but we are not done at that time.
No, we're far from that, far from done.
And we have to learn everything, and I mean we are busy doing it. We're all through our senses. They just go on to overdrive to what we can see and what we can. I saw a little thing on the news the other night. They had this child that had been blind, and whenever they took the bandages off, they did corrective surgery. And when that little kid could see, and he was like 18 months old, and I mean, just the expression on that face and what he was saying, it was unbelievable. So we can always see things differently than we did before because we're seeing things, even if we close our eyes, we're imagining.
Right.
So we're not born once and done, because every day we have the opportunity to rebirth ourselves.
We do. And if only we had that enthusiasm that we did when we were kids and saw things for the first time. We tended to take it for granted, as we get older, and we don't really realize that ability to change is still there. There's still so much beauty in the world, so many things we haven't really paid attention to, but we don't really appreciate it as we get older.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I was going with our ending, is to constantly be surprised, because energy is never depleted.
Right.
It's never depleted. It can be changed, but it's never depleted. And so if our darkness and our gloominess can get darker and darker, that we have the choice of turning the light on, of at least seeing things in a little different perspective, seeing them differently. So, we have this opportunity of giving birth to ourselves again and again and again. And so every choice that we make really is the principle of a new day, of a new way of doing something. If we choose to do this instead of that, there's a lot of cookbooks that says use this and not that, and to get back to a plant-based or to get something more healthy and so forth. So as how I like to look at things in baby steps. So what does it mean to perceive? Well, it means to be aware of. We may not have known it before, but if we're beginning to perceive it, we're becoming aware of it. And we can kind of detect it. Maybe someone walks in the room and you don't see them, but you sense that they're there. It's a sense of. You have a discernment, kind of an apprehension that something's going on here. And then that perception, that what we perceive leads to perception, which is where we begin to comprehend it. And in that comprehension, we automatically, because all of these things, happens automatically, we begin to make a judgment of it. Do I like this? Do I not like this? We make some kind of a judgment. And then that judgment because as we are aware of our insides. So I would suggest that perception is how we seeing or doing. That the world we see is what it is.
Right.
It's not more than, it's not less than, because we have a way of adding to it. We see the situation, and the way we see the situation, I mean, you go outside and maybe it's a beautiful sunny day, but to another person it's just, oh, it's too sunny.
Right.
Or maybe it may be snowing, or it may be raining, and to another person it's just so delighted that we're having the moisture, and to another it would be, oh no, it's an oh no. So the way we see a situation attests to our frame of mind. The outside picture that we see is a projection of our inside attitudes and stances. The outside picture is that inside condition of who we are, of who we have become. Toni Morrison, a great writer, I think she died in August, and her last book, I haven't read it, I'm going to get it and read it because I love her writing, is on developing self-esteem and how to. But I loved what the book talks about, on the page of it. It said that she had corrosive public and private pain of discrimination, that she always returned to her belief and her ability to reimagine the world.
Yeah.
And as we realize we have that, we have that ability to reframe things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that you just have to learn how to do. Otherwise, you get swayed by everything, all the stuff that goes on around you.
So,
yeah.
Instead of seeking to change the world,
let's change yourself first.
We have to start with something that we can work with. Because
something we have control over.
Something you have control over. It's something that that you can just go right to it. So don't seek to change the world. Don't seek to change someone else. Instead, seek to change your mind about the world. Choose to change your mind about the person. Now, I am not saying that they're not a royal pain.
Right. Exactly.
or a bore, or that they are not being unkind. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that as we begin to see our humanity, and maybe we're even projecting some of our humanity onto them, because we're all flawed and fabulous. And we have those non-lovable things about us, and we may be projecting it onto them, and it's what we see in them that's really a reflection of us that we dislike about them.
Right.
And it takes a lot of humility in order to be able to realize that and to see that. Yeah. And that as I begin to change my mind, well, why? Or why would I want to change my mind? Or how can I change my mind? Well, we are all connected. As we begin to realize this, we're all connected, and we all influence each other. And everything looked upon with vision, as we can see it with what it can become. It's what we see the plant that's growing, and it's really pretty, but when it blooms, well, what's it going to be? And as we can begin to look at someone else as what they could become, or what we can become, and that as we can begin to be more of an influencer toward.
Well, and going back to what you were saying earlier about, somebody might be a pain, and yes, they might be a royal pain, but the way you look at it is very important, because if you spend all your time focusing on what a royal pain they are, instead of what you're really trying to accomplish, why am I spending time with this person? Maybe they're a family member, and I I want to stay close to my family. And so instead of focusing so much on the fact that we never agree on anything, he never has anything nice to say, making it a challenge, try to figure out, how can I make this thing work? Instead of focusing on the negative, it was how can I make it different? What can I do to make this relationship different? Because it takes two to to feel that pain and to be annoyed by the other person. I mean, go back to reframing things. If I reframe the way it is, maybe I can find something or get us to talk about something that won't be as unpleasant.
Right. So that judgment, that no trust, that whatever the world that we're judging is really maybe it's well, it's just beginning to look at and see. And sometimes what you can do and what you don't do, is maybe just pay attention to. Part of becoming aware is paying attention to our tone of voice or our facial expression, and think about what we wanted to say as opposed to what we're going to choose to say, because we can choose the thoughts we can choose the thoughts we think, but we can also choose the words that we speak and the tone of voice in which we speak it. And so as we begin to look at those things, and realizing that our energy is not destroyed. It's either becoming darker or it's becoming lighter. And which one is more easy to see with?
Yeah.
Is it easier to see in a darkened room, or is it easier to see in one that's well lit? And so as we can begin to spread a little light, spread a little love, spread a little, and seeing that it is, seeing how we can change us from the inside out and have more of an influence on others.
And is it really important for us to be with those people? I mean, if somebody really is a pain to be around, well, maybe you choose not to be around that person. But if it's somebody you really feel it's important to keep that relationship going, okay, how can I keep this relationship so it's somewhat pleasant for me? and because it doesn't do any good to keep the relationship up if it really is that difficult and that hard, unpleasant for you. And so maybe we can find some common ground, or maybe I choose, well, this really, I'm not getting anything out of this, so I'm gonna stop this relationship. But you go back to, is it worth it? Is it? And if it is, then let's try to make the best of it.
Right. And begin to kind of evaluate and see how it's working and how it can work better. Mm-hmm. That especially, if we're all family, if we're all coworkers, and you really like the job, but the coworkers are difficult or the boss is difficult, there can be so many ways that can be worked with and beginning to see and, changing our attitude about it. It's just amazing, as we begin to change. And the lady that was talking about, it's just amazing how those people are changing.
Right. All those other people are changing. Okay.
Right. And as you can begin to realize that, well, why am I staying in this relationship, whether it's a job or maybe it's somebody that lives next door to you? Well, it's better to be a little friendly to your neighbor than to not be. Be more pleasant in the whole neighborhood. And as we can begin to realize that, well, if it's something that I'm stuck with, but I don't have to be stubborn about it. I can be maybe a little more flexible, and begin to realize the fact that maybe I am seeing them in a way that I'm judging them, but the fact of the matter is, if I didn't see it in you, I couldn't see it in me. Mm-hmm. And because I'm seeing it in you, must be a whole lot to do with the fact that it's in me too.
It's in me somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Whether I want to admit it or not. And so it's how can I get along reasonably well with this individual, so that you can do your job and I can do my job, or you can do your part and I can do my part. And we can accomplish more together than we can apart as a whole, because we need each other. And pay attention.
We do. And I've heard from some people, they talk about how they just don't like having to deal with people, and people are so difficult. And they're, you can't lump everybody. When you start making comments like that, you think about, well, okay, I'm lumping everybody else into this one category. So maybe I'm the one who's difficult to deal with. Maybe I need to look inside myself first, because people are who they are. They're going to do what they're going to do, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. As much as you want to, it just doesn't happen until you start making changes in yourself, and then you might see people starting to get easier to deal with if you change some things about yourself and how you think about people and how you respond when others are around, and how uptight you get about certain things.
Mm-hmm. And as we can choose to begin to see some goodness in the other person.
Yeah, right, because there's always something positive there. There always is. Sometimes you have to really dig deep in there, but there's always something. And if you can focus on that positive, because that's what we pay attention to, that the other person's going to give us more of, because they want attention.
And as we can choose to see something good in them, something,
right.
Some little something, then what that does is that begins to release us from, well, it just begins to set us free, to let them be the grump that they are, if they're continuing to be a grump.
Right.
It begins to release us. And then whether we bind something or whether we release it, it's everything, every thought we ever think affects us. And so those thoughts that we're thinking toward that person that we are disagreeing with, or that whatever we're projecting onto them, as we can begin to choose to not think those binding thoughts, we're going to release us. And in releasing us, it's just an automatic, because we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
We're all connected. And as even just that really firm face that just has a little bit of a softening, you can see it. Those things are palpable. You can begin to see it when someone begins to breathe that sigh of release. And that I ask frequently, if you're backed against the wall, if you have whomever it is, if you're backed against the wall, what would you do to keep that customer? What would you do to keep that, Well, sometimes you just have to give up. And I know in teaching in working with the criminals and the convicts, they said, there's no way I'd give up. But the thing of it is, sometimes just in that giving that release and giving up, well, it's hard to fight against something. It's hard to push against something if there's nothing there to push against.
Oh, yeah.
And as long as you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, if there's nothing there to push against it, well, just keep ringing that doorbell and ringing that doorbell. But if it doesn't ring, or if no one answers it, eventually, if there's nothing to push against, why keep pushing?
Right.
And what are you doing to yourself? So if we choose to release and step back, and the snitches that I'm going to take one step to the side and just go on about your merry way,
right?
Or your not so merry way. But and that as we begin to change ourselves, so how do we change ourselves?
Or just ask the other person, you're putting up so much resistance here. What's it going to take to get you to give a little bit, to put down your guard? What's it going to take? Because when you're pushing against each other, the obvious response is to push back. But until you say, come to some kind of an agreement, is, well, we want this we decided that this relationship is important. We don't care too much for each other, but we decided that we're going to be in each other's lives. So how can we make it better? How can we make it more pleasant for each of us, and instead of fighting all the time? Maybe there's certain things we don't talk about, or look at things a different way.
Yeah. And because energy cannot be destroyed, why don't we begin to look at how we want our energy to be used?
Right.
And whether we want it to be used as being peaceful, not maybe ready to sign on the dotted line of an agreement, but to have a little bit more peace, then we can begin to, I cannot give my energy. I don't want to give my energy into anger, into hate, into distrust. I don't want to put my energy in that. And just as I refuse to put my energy into that, that's going to have some kind of a releasing on that person that.
And that's a good way to look at that. I mean, you can't destroy energy, but you just have so much that you can use. And if it takes a lot out of you when you are angry, when you are upset, like, is that the way I want to spend this valuable resource I have called energy? Maybe there's another way I can use that energy that works better for the both of us, instead of becoming angry and getting all.
And so instead of shutting down, or instead of acting out, begin to engage.
Yeah.
How is a way that I can engage with this person? And sometimes it is by just keeping our mouth shut and not saying anything, and not trying to correct. Just like the water on the duck's back, just let it roll off.
Just let it roll off.
Yeah. But don't shut down, because there's a big difference in clamming up and in choosing to not say anything,
because even if you're choosing not to say anything because you're clamming up, the other person knows that you're not happy, because that you've got a different type of energy that's coming out from you that people are sensing.
Right. And it's readable. You can see it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes just that, okay, I surrender, I give up, and but as in the story with the Sneetches, that one didn't change, and all I had to do was just take one little step to the side, and but the world didn't come to an end. The world grew, and in a few years, a new highway came through. They built it over the stubborn people that stayed.
Right.
And so they may not change, but our life can go on and be fluid and be. And even in a work situation, even in a family situation, it can still be an element of caring and concern rather than disconnecting, if we're really willing to work at it. And so it kind of goes back into looking into our own wisdom heart. Am I willing to do this? Because our mind will hold a grudge, but our heart never will.
Right.
It's willing to receive the compassion and being willing to let go, because you know what? It wants to keep on beating.
Yeah. And I think once you get to the point where you're not holding grudges against people, you'll find that you don't feel that intense need to hold a grudge against people.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was raised, what I saw was, if somebody did something wrong to you, you never forgot. and that's the way I was growing up. But I later learned that that's not very healthy to do that. And now it just seems like it doesn't really matter what people say. I understand that it's them saying it, and it really doesn't have much to do with me. And so I just don't hold grudges the way I used to. And so.
And isn't it freeing?
Excuse me?
Isn't it freeing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the belief system was that when somebody did something that you didn't like or went against your values, you were not supposed to like this person. You were not supposed to associate with this person.
And get even or get better than or something.
But then, the belief system has changed and said, well, they're entitled to their opinions. They're entitled to say whatever they want to me. and I can take it, but I don't have to take it, and I don't have to hold it against them, because I kind of feel bad for them, because I know that they're unhappy and things are not going well with them, because they're just not happy.
Exactly. And is that you can have a little compassion for them, then maybe they can learn to have a little compassion for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And realizing that it's all in our thoughts and how we think about things, and the way we think about them then becomes the way we act upon them.
Right.
And so, we talk about we're just loving people, but we've played with love so much that we don't even know what love is anymore, it seems like. And so blanket yourself with love and forgiveness, and then hold it with stability and integrity. And it's visible.
Mm-hmm.
It's palpable. And
but it has to start with you. Like you said, change is an inside job. Nobody can make that happen for you. You have to decide that for yourself, that that's the way you're going to look at things, and that's the way you're going to do it. And then after a while, you just are that way. You don't really even have to think about it anymore. It just happens.
Becoming who you really are, deep down inside, who you were created to be.
Yeah.
A person of worth and value, and it's always been there.
Yeah. And keeping yourself from feeling all that stress of holding that grudge and not wanting to talk to that person. And I mean, because that is stressful, and it's exhausting, because you've got to remember who you can talk to and who you can't talk to.
Mm-hmm. And it's going back and looking at Toni Morris's, that of all of the the corrosion, the public and the private pain of discrimination, but always returning to the belief in her ability to reimagine the world. Mm-hmm. To reimagine. And the belief, a belief is something you have to buy into.
Oh, absolutely.
Buy into the fact that you can change your thoughts, you can change your mind, you can change your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people may be upset at you for not getting upset because they wanted that reaction from you, and you're not playing to, their plan is falling apart because you're not taking it that way.
Right. And
I remember a long time ago when I was a kid, his mother was all upset about something, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, I fussed at this guy, and he just told me that what I said was right. And I'm just so angry that he wouldn't argue with me." And I just thought that was such an odd comment. But when you think about it, sometimes that is what we want, is we want the other person to become upset at us. And when they're not, I mean, it just takes everything out of it, because they're not fighting us, and mm-hmm. we can't prove that we're right and they're wrong. They're just admitting that we're right. And what fun is that, right?
You can't push against if there's nothing to push back.
Right.
And so it's just not being the one that pushes, but being the one that is giving room for the other person to grow.
Yeah.
I know that was one thing, you give you room to grow. As a kid, you get shoes a little bit bigger, clothes a little bit bigger, so you have room to grow.
Right. Yes.
And I tell that to people quite frequently. I tell you what, I'll give you room to grow.
And so how do they take it when you tell them that?
Well, usually okay.
Yeah.
Usually. There's been a few that's kind of gotten sniffy, though you think I need to grow.
Yeah.
And hopefully, compassion will follow them, but we can have a hard heart and not let any compassion get in. It's entirely up to us. We can stay angry, or we can begin to release it. And it's really a gift you give to yourself
Yes, it is.
To forgive yourself and to release those things.
Yeah.
Because I don't have anything to forgive myself for. Well,
maybe you need to look again, right?
I know. Yeah. But you have to do it yourself. It's not, as long as you're believing those things and you've bought into it, it can make life really hard, really difficult. And changes in inside jobs as we change from the inside out, begin to see things differently, begin to give a new perspective to it, begin to realize that, we're more alike than we're different. And maybe the thing I'm disliking about you is really a reflection of me.
Right. I think that's a good way to end it here. We're running out of time here, but yeah, to notice when we're starting to feel those negative emotions, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some lesson for me to learn here. Right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks, Mona, for today's topic, and we'll be here again next week for another edition of Greet the Week, and we hope to see you then.